Those are kind words. And listen, I know you guys love your pastor. I think he pastors you really well. But what you need to know is he pastors really well also. And so he's a gift to the whole city. And I am coming from Calvary, where God really is doing some incredible, exciting things right now. And I'm excited to kind of represent our church here with you today. But if you have a copy of the scriptures, I invite you to turn to Matthew chapter 20. And I remember a while back, I was at a Wendy's. All great stories begin at a Wendy's, right? And I'm waiting patiently in line, and I'm pretty perceptive, kind of paying attention to things that are going on around me. And there's a guy in front of me who's ordering his food, and he orders his meal, and he orders a large drink with his meal. He seems fine with it, seems like a good deal. He pays for his order, and then he steps to the side. And I step up to the counter, and I order a meal, and I order a medium drink, all right? But the girl working at the counter, she says, "Sir, I'm really sorry, we're out of medium cups. Is it okay if I just give you a large cup?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And so she hands me a large cup, and she charges me for the medium, all right? This fellow over here to the side, he sees this happen, and he loses his mind. Eyes bulging with rage, face going red, and he unloads on this poor girl. "This isn't fair. How dare you? You gave him a large drink for the price of a medium. You made me pay for the whole large." And he's causing this whole scene. Everybody's uncomfortable. And this poor girl looks at him and she's like, "Sir, this is a Wendy's, relax, And she's like, "You ordered a large, And so this whole thing happens, and I'm sitting there eating my meal as fast as I can because this guy's still in the corner. Everybody in the restaurant's uncomfortable. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on? But I realized in that moment that there are a few things in this life that upset us more than when our sense of fairness is threatened, right? Nothing upsets us more or brings out the worst side of us than when our sense of fairness is threatened. This man felt that it wasn't fair, that I was getting something for a smaller price than him. And see, when we feel slighted, or when we feel that someone gets something that we have without paying the price that we did, it upsets us. And what I want us to see this morning is that while that sort of entitlement may look really silly at a Wendy's, there is nothing more poisonous to our spiritual lives and to our own joy than a sense of entitlement. Entitlement can take many forms. It can take the form of envy, of jealousy, of discontentment. It can take the form of feelings of superiority. Entitlement is dangerous because what it does is it robs us of joy and it keeps us from being happy for other people. Because if we're so worried about what they're getting, we start worried about what we're getting, and we can't be happy with them. And most importantly, entitlement blinds us to the wonder of God's grace. Because here's the thing. If you've ever had an encounter with the grace of God, you know that God's grace can actually be upsetting to you if you don't have the heart to receive it. See, if we don't have the eyes to see His goodness, if we're blinded by a sense of entitlement, we can never see God's grace with clear eyes. And so I love the parables, and so this morning we're going to look at one of my favorites, Matthew chapter 20, which is the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And we're going to look at what Jesus says. We're going to work through it kind of line by line, read a little bit, talk a little bit, read a little bit, talk a little bit. So here we go, verse 1. This is Jesus talking. He says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard." Fitting. This church was Vineyard Church in its original. So after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. So here's what's happening right here. You have a landowner who's looking for some workers to work in his vineyard. And so early one morning, about 6 a.m., he goes out and he finds a group of day laborers. He tells them about the job. He offers them a denarius, which a denarius is 1 day's wage. All right, so that's a fair deal. Here's the job. Here's the pay. They agree to it. They're excited. He's excited. Everyone's happy. Everyone agrees. These guys get in the truck and they head to the vineyard. All right, that's the setup of the story. And then verse 3, it says, "And going on about the third hour," this is 9 a.m., he saw more day laborers standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "Why don't you guys go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right, I will give you." So there's no agreement here on the wage, but they just trust the landowner to do right by them. They go, all right, this guy's going to give us a good deal. We're going to work. We're going to make a little money. And so off they went. Verse 5, going out again about the 6th hour, which is noon, and then he did it again in the 9th hour. He did the same thing. He's picking up more workers as the day's going on. Again, no contract, but the workers trust that the landowner is going to take care of them. And then at the 11th hour, this is 5 p.m., all right, he went out and found others standing, and he said to them, why do you stand here idle all day? And they said to him, because no one has hired us. And he said to them, well, you go into the vineyard too. Now these guys show up. There's only an hour left of work to do before the sun goes down. Most of the workers are already packing it up for the day. These guys show up at the very, very end. They half-heartedly prune a few branches, take a half-hour bathroom break, and before you know it, it's quitting time, right? They've done hardly any work. And then it says, verse 8, when the evening came, this is 6 p.m., the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, all right, call the laborers, pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first. And when those hired, about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Now, when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. So here's what's happening. The 11th hour guys line up. The guys that showed up at 5 p.m. and only worked an hour. They show up, the landowner comes out, and he begins to pay them. And what does he pay them? He pays them a full denarius. They've worked for less than an hour. He pays them a full denarius. And these guys are fired up. They're like, a full day's wage for an hour of work? And he's like, man, I told you I'd take care of you guys, I got you. Well, and so these guys, they're pumped. They've worked an hour. They got a full day's wage. And then the other guys, their minds start spinning. They're going, oh, this guy's generous. These fellows worked for an hour. They got a full day's wage. What I'm going to get? I bet I'm going to get more. And then he goes down the line, and what does he pay? Everybody gets a denarius, a denarius, a denarius, a denarius, all the way down to the guys that have been there since early in the morning. All those guys that have been there since the beginning of the day, they're all sunburned, they're tired, and they get the same amount as the guys who showed up at the very end. And they become enraged, like the fella at the Wendy's. And it says this, verse 11, and on receiving it, they grumbled at who? The master of the house, saying, these last guys worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day in the scorching heat. They say, this isn't fair. But he replied to one of them, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me to work a day for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with that which belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? And then Jesus says, so the last will be first, and the first will be last. Now, this is a parable about the grace of God. And when we use the word grace, I think often we forget how scandalous grace is. We hear the word grace, we think, oh, that's cozy, like a warm little blanket. That feels good, grace. But grace is actually scandalous. The worker who works just 1 hour can receive the same reward as the one who worked a full day. This threatens our sense of fairness. It threatens our sense of justice. But what the grace of God shows us is that through Jesus, we can receive the rewards that we never worked for and we can never earn on our own. And the good news of grace is that the good news of Jesus is for everyone. Not just for those with seniority, not just the moral and the upright and the religious, or those who have it all together, or those who've worked all day. The grace of Jesus is also for those whose lives are falling apart. And the grace of Jesus is for those who showed up late. You see, the Bible is not what most people think it is. The Bible is not a story of how the good and the hardworking and the put together are in, while the bad, the rebellious, and the lazy are out. The Bible is not a record of conditional acceptance. Obey, do the work, and then and only then can you be accepted. Rather, the Bible is the record of the shocking grace of Jesus constantly and continually being poured out on the undeserving. For those who have ears to hear, let them hear. This is what Jesus says of all the parables. But if your ears have been plugged up by a sense of entitlement, religious entitlement, Grace will only be frustrating to you. It'll feel unjust, it'll feel unfair, it'll feel scandalizing. And if we're honest, especially those of us who grew up here in the Bible Belt, amen? We all have a tendency to let religious entitlement creep into our spiritual lives. And it looks like this. God, I've worshiped you, I've obeyed you, I've never missed a Sunday, I've learned, I read my devotional, therefore, you must accept me and you must give me all the things that I want. And you must bless me and you must give me what I feel I deserve because I've put in the work. I've shown up on time. And what we do is we live as if our behavior can put God into our debt. And so what happens is it becomes easy then to grow angry when there are people who do less than us and seem to get the same as us, or perhaps even more than us. See, an entitled spirituality believes that God owes us something, and we expect Him to give us what we deserve. You owe me, God. But the gospel and the grace of Jesus says, God, you have accepted me. You have blessed me in all of my shortcomings and all of my failures. Therefore, my life is yours. Whatever you want, I will worship you, I will obey you. You see, a true understanding of the grace of Jesus believes that God owes me nothing, but He's given me far more than I deserve. Let me ask you, do you know this grace? Do you understand it? And I'm going to ask us, we're going to do 4 diagnostic questions today. For some of us, this might be a little convicting, but we need to be convicted every now and then. 4 diagnostic questions to determine if you fully understand the power of God's grace, or if your conception of faith has been infected by a sense of entitlement. So 4 diagnostic questions. And this isn't for your neighbor, okay? This is for you, okay? Don't be thinking about the person next to you. This is for you. All right, number 1, do you easily become bitter with God? Notice in verse 11, it says, and on receiving their pay, they grumbled at the master of the house. Now this is a parable. The master of the house is God. And notice in the early verses, these guys were super grateful just to have a job. They were happy to have a job. This is a fair wage. This is a good job. I'm going into the vineyard, happy to be there. They went into the vineyard excited about the day, and they go from grateful to grumbling in the span of just a few hours. How did that happen so fast? How did they go from grateful to the landowner for giving them a job to griping at him at the end of the day? How did that happen so fast? And let me ask you, has it ever happened to you? When my wife and I were first married, we headed off to seminary. So we were living in North Carolina, and I was in seminary, and I got a job right away working in the seminary's mailroom, all right? Making minimum wage, working 15 hours a week. And also I was working on the side as a track coach, getting a stipend at a local high school. And I made the mistake one time of adding up my stipend, taking my stipend, and then adding up all the hours I worked to coach that track team, and realized I was making like 3 cents an hour, okay? And so any teachers, educators, coaches, you deserve to be paid more, all right? But I'm working 15 hours a week, minimum wage, and making $1,500 for, thousands of hours worth of work. And meanwhile, it's 2008. Hello, anybody remember that? My wife is struggling to find a job. And so here we are, we're newly married, we have no money, and I'm this new husband trying to provide for this new family of mine, and I'm going, what in the world? And I'm ashamed that I can't provide for my family. And I remember praying to God, and this was my prayer. God, what in the world? I'm in seminary, for crying out loud. That was my prayer. And what was I saying? God, I'm entitled to more because here I am training to be a pastor. I'm doing things for you, therefore you should give me more than I deserve. It was an entitlement mentality. I felt that God owed me more than I was getting, and I quickly became bitter with Him. Now, what about you? Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever done this? When your life doesn't go the way you planned for it, the way you hoped for it, do you grumble at God? Do you sometimes find yourself becoming bitter toward God? That's diagnostic question number 1. Number 2, do you easily become bitter toward others? So in this parable, when the group that had worked all day saw that the landowner paid everyone equally, notice what they said. Verse 12. These last men worked only 1 hour, and listen to what they said. You have made them equal to us. Uh-oh. There it is. There's the bitterness. But it's not just toward the landowner now, it's toward their coworkers. This is a sense of superiority. you've made them equal to us. They're not equal to me. And at first glance, if we're honest, we read that parable and you're like, it kind of seems reasonable, doesn't it? They did work longer hours, but this isn't unfair, and here's why. Because again, they were paid what they agreed to. Verse 13, the landowner says, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. You agreed to work with me a whole day for a denarius. Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you, and am I not allowed to do with what I choose with that which belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? See, we read this and on first glance, these guys are angry because there's some injustice going on. But these guys were not angry that they got paid too little. They were angry because they felt that others got paid too much. And it looks on the surface like their anger is coming from a sense of justice and fairness, but it's not. It's coming from a place of superiority. They were angry that the landowner was generous with somebody else. And there are so many ways we do this with our own lives, don't we? God, why did they get that opportunity? Why did they get that promotion? Why did she get that relationship? Why did he get that position? Don't I deserve these things more than them? I've been here this whole time, God. But again, there's an entitlement mentality. The belief that I'm entitled to the things that God is blessing others with. My friend and my former pastor, J.D. Greer, says that this bitterness toward others, he says it's evil and it comes from two places. The first place it comes from is an unbelief in the goodness of God who has promised to take care of you. You see what other people have and you say, God, why aren't you being good to me? But he is good to you. You're just comparing yourself to others and you're failing to see all the ways that God has provided for you. Those early workers, the landowner provided for them. They were too caught up in what other people had to be grateful for what the landowner had given them. Number one, unbelief in the goodness of God who's promised to take care of you. Number two, a foolish pride that assumes God owes you certain things. Proverbs 23 verse 17 says, do not let your heart envy sinners. There's surely hope for you and your hope will not be cut off. So all of us, we have these feelings of superiority, these feelings of jealousy, and what it does is it causes us to look down our noses at others. And what happens then is we resent God when he blesses those we think don't deserve it, but we also begin to resent the very blessings God has given us because now we feel entitled to more. And we become ungrateful for what God has given to us. We become jealous of what God has given to others. We become angry with God for not giving us what he's given them. And we have completely lost sight of God's grace and his kindness toward us. And let me ask you, why do you begrudge God's generosity? Is he not allowed to do what he chooses with that which belongs to him? If God is good to someone else, it doesn't mean that God's being bad to you. It just simply means God's being good to them. And we are to celebrate with those who celebrate. Do you easily find yourself becoming bitter toward others? Number three, do you easily become bitter toward yourself? Or put it another way, how do you respond and where do you turn in your failures? So this isn't in the text here, but I can speak from my own experience. When you have an entitlement understanding of religion, you can often forget God's grace in your own failures. And you can be harsh with yourself. So harsh that you're unable to receive God's kindness toward you. Because here's what happens. In our failures, often what we say to ourselves is, well, I don't deserve God's kindness. I don't deserve God's generosity toward me. Because I know I'm not alone. I know that everybody in this room has had that moment in their life where you did the thing that you said you would never do. Or you did the thing that you said you would never do again. Or some of you, if you're like me, you've done the thing that you didn't even know you were capable of. And you're like, what do I do with all this? I feel all this shame. I feel all this guilt. Where do you turn when you feel like that? See, if you forget the grace of God in these moments, you will either turn inward in shame and anger towards yourself, or you will turn away from God altogether because you feel undeserving. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but you do the thing, and your first impulse is, I should pray. I should open up the scriptures, or I should go to church, but there's a part of you that goes, who do you think you are? Right now, after you did that thing, to go to church after you did that thing, who do you think you are? You see, if you have an entitlement view of religion, not only will you become bitter toward others, but you will actually weaponize that entitlement toward yourself when you fall short. and you'll beat yourself up. But the grace of God invites us not to run from Him in our failures, but to run toward Him. When I was a college pastor, in Jacksonville, Alabama, Jacksonville State University. Go Gamecocks, anybody? And I had, in my college ministry, I had a student who, he was such a good kid. Loved Jesus, was kind to his peers, was a leader. I mean, God had gifted him all sorts of incredible ways. He was a leader in our ministry. And he was one of those kids that just had never done anything wrong. But then one weekend, as often happens when you're 19 and in college, he gave in to temptation. And he did a few things one weekend that he never thought he was capable of. And so he texted me on a Saturday morning. He said, Pastor Will, I got to meet with you. And I said, come meet with me first thing on Monday morning. And so he comes in my office on Monday morning, and y'all, I've never seen a kid walk into a pastor's office with such shame. Just shoulders slouched over, and he said, Pastor Will, he said, I need to know how I can make it right with God. And I said to him, by grace you have been saved through faith, not a result of your works, so that you cannot boast. I said, repent of what you've done, and receive the grace of Jesus and His grace. I said, and then thank Him for Jesus, who's already paid the price for that sin you committed this weekend. And he said, I've already done all that. I have repented. I have asked forgiveness. And then he said, but what do I do now? How do I make it right? He wanted to know what he could do. I said, man, there's nothing more you can do. Jesus has paid it all. Receive His grace. Stand up, brush your shoulders off, and go back abiding in Him and pursuing Him. You see, but this young man, what happened is he turned inward in his failure, and he wanted to make resolutions. He wanted to punish himself. He wanted to beat himself up enough to where he felt like then he could be right with God. But he simply could not receive the grace of God. Here was a kid who all his life saw himself as the early morning worker. I'm not one of the lazy ones, he would say to himself. I'm not one of those ones that shows up at the end of the day. I'm one of the good religious kids. But now he was sitting in my office wrestling with the fact that he wasn't as entitled to God's blessing as he always assumed he was. Those people he looked down on his whole life, those people who didn't deserve God's kindness in his mind, he was now one of them. Now he was the 11th hour worker, getting more grace than he deserved, and he didn't know what to do with that. He struggled to accept it. See, there is no better indicator of your understanding of God's grace than where your failures lead you. Where do you turn? Romans 5:20 says, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And we often think, where sin abounds, God must be disappointed in me. But 1 Corinthians 13 tells us that the love of God does not keep a record of wrongs. Can I ask you, church, do you believe that? Do you really believe that in your worst moments, not a few days after your worst moment, after you've had a couple of good days, but do you believe that in your worst moments, God stands ready to offer you His forgiveness and His grace? Do you believe that in your worst moments, the full denarius of God's grace is available to you, even on those days where you show up late? And number 4, who do you identify with when you read this parable? All right? I want you to be honest here. When you heard this parable read about 15 minutes ago, who did you identify with? Did you identify with the workers who showed up early? Did you share in their frustration? Well, they got a point. I mean, it isn't really fair. They worked all day, and this guy, See, we all need some correction here. Because most of us read the Bible like we're the main character, don't we? Case in point, David and Goliath. We read David and Goliath, and we love to put ourselves in David's shoes, don't we? How can I slay the giants in my life, right? I'm going to slay my giants. But have you ever read that story? Have you ever considered that in the story of David and Goliath, you might be more like David's brothers or the cowardly Israelite soldiers who were too afraid to step up to the giant? But here comes David, where everybody else was too afraid, where everybody else was incapable. David steps in and fights in their place, and he wins the victory for his entire nation. And when he comes back with the head of the Philistine, Who gets to receive the spoils of war? Not just David, but all of the army of Israel. Does this remind you of anything else? The giants that we face are sin, shame, sickness, Satan, death, and hell itself. And what are you going to do against those giants? You think you're going to pick up your sling and your stone and take them on your own power? You going to slay those giants? I don't think so. You have no way of standing up to those giants. But here comes Jesus of Nazareth, courageous where you're afraid, strong where you are weak. And he steps in and he fights the battles that you cannot win. He dies your death on his cross and secures his victory in the resurrection. And now you receive the rewards of his triumph. With that in mind, can I tell you something? None of us are the worker that showed up at 6 a.m. You're not the one who showed up at 9 a.m. You're probably not even the guy who showed up at 5 p.m. and worked an hour. You're the guy who showed up late after the field had already been plowed and after everybody else had already packed up and gone home. See, not a single one of us, quote, bore the burden of the day and the scorching heat. Only Jesus did that. Jesus lived the perfect life we could never live. He died the death that we deserve, and he raises from the dead, and he stands forward in victory and offers us the rewards and the spoils of his triumph. And the master of the house, the owner of all the land, our Father in heaven, when he pays out the rewards, he gives us the full denarius that Jesus has earned for us. Eternal life, forgiveness of sins, a new name, a new inheritance. That is the gospel. That is the grace of God. And we sing about it, we read about it, we talk about it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. But can I ask you, is grace amazing to you? You know you're not entitled to it. You're not entitled to God's kindness, but in his kindness, he has lavished it upon you. Not because of how hard you've worked or what you've done, but fully because of what Christ has done for you on the cross. You don't earn this grace, you receive it. My question for you is, have you received it? Anyone who has ears to hear, let them hear. It is an honor to be with you today, Hope City. Let me pray for you.